All right.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited.
Highlights, if not the highlight.
Wow. It's really something. Okay. I have to invest even more attention in making it good because.
It's a great blanket. Very. I specifically.
That's right. He said that they'll each day at the bar.
How long after you got
Yeah,
married?
my God, I forgot every day.
We were married for 2 or 3 years,
So then you okay.
and then I went to law school.
Oh, so you have kids already?
So we had a kid in our first year of law school.
So you had one kid when you went to the bar.
Correct.
Okay. Pinchos ben Elazar ben Aharon HaKohen. The Torah goes out of its way to tell you that Pinchas's grandfather was Aaron HaKohen. So Rashi says, where's that coming from? He's been mentioned before, Pinchas. The story of Pinchas killing Zimri and Cosby and saving the Jews from complete destruction happens in last week's parsha. It's the last thing. And then in this week's parsha is the reward for Pinchas. So Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen he's not referred to that way when the story happens. He's only referred to that way when Hashem begins discussing him. And Rashi says, people, the members of other tribes, were making fun of Pinchas. And isn't that terrible? And they were saying, Hara'isam ben Putize. You guys see this son of a Puti. Now, what does that mean? Puti, we're going to find out, means his father-in-law, his grandfather, his father's father-in-law, the other grandfather. So one grandfather was Aaron, but Eliezer married from the daughters of Putiel, which is one of the names of Yisro. And did you see this child of a Puti, whose grandfather was Mefatem, that's Puti, fattened up cows for the slaughter to idols. So you know who this guy is. He's the son of a former pope. You understand? A grandson, right? And that's where this is coming from. This is not coming from a good place. It's coming from his grandfather and all the bad mitos that he got from his grandfather, Yisro, Putia. And Hashem doesn't deny that he might have gotten some bad mitos from there. Doesn't deny that. But Hashem says, Lefikach yichaso hakosav acha Aaron. That's why the pasuk goes and says he's the grandson of Aaron. So Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron, he wasn't doing this out of the things he learned from Putia. He was doing this out of the things he learned from Aaron. So in other words, you might suspect that this man. So I wanted to share with you what it says here. This is a sefer first. We'll start with something from the Yad Avi Shalom. The sefer Yad Avi Shalom was Rabbi Yosef Shalom of Pizence, which was in Merid. This is some part of Europe. And he died in 1689. He was born in 1630. The sefer was published posthumously in 1720. And recently, they put out a beautiful, it was republished multiple times, but they put out a beautiful new edition from Oz V'Hadar, which you can read with footnotes. If it quotes an Alshich, it brings you all the language of the Alshich, like just a beautiful thing. So it reopened this sefer for many people that wouldn't want to spend time in the Otzar Chachma looking at the fine print and the old ones that are a little different, hard for us to read these days. So listen what it says. He says, there is a beautiful piece from the Alshich who says about Kalev. Do you remember, Kalev is described as having a ruach acheres, a different attitude. A ruach acheret. He had a different attitude, a different sense. Now, what did he do? He didn't curse out the land of Israel. He didn't give bad news that was not entirely honest and mislead people. So why is that a ruach acheres? So he says, here's why. Every avera that a person does, there becomes a koach tamei mashchis umechabel. For every sin that a person commits, we know every mitzvah creates a good angel, and every avera makes a bad angel. What is that angel? Some person who lives. What is that? So the answer is it's a spiritual influence that impacts one's behavior and one's children's behavior too. So people that behave honestly give over a legacy of honesty. I remember. Oh my goodness! Wow. I want to welcome Rabbi Lappin and Rebbitzin Ember for joining us. This is a great covet. The amount of years that I spent in Rabbi Lappin's shir, and you know how we've quoted him so many times. What a covet! Wow. Okay, so the malach, says the Yad Avi Shalom. This is how he understands. The malach that is created when a person does a mitzvah or an avera is a spiritual influence that will guide the behavior of that person and their children as well. It'll stick with them. I'll just tell you a personal story that sticks with me a lot. My mother was very meticulously she's alive well, not so well, but Baruch Hashem, she's alive. So I don't mean to speak of her in the past tense, but in her business life, she was meticulously honest. And she would tell me stories about her mother. Her mother once lost her wedding, her engagement ring, her diamond ring, and it was gone, and the insurance paid out nicely for it. And years later, cleaning for Pesach, she found it in a grate somewhere, and she called the insurance company and said, I found it. And they said, we've never heard that before. And she said, I would like to send the money back. And they said, we don't have a process for that. There is no way to do it. And her mother found a way to send the money back. And this was something that, to this day, it's a story that I tell my children. And it influences, so just on a simple level, meaningful choices that demonstrate our values, that's a mitzvah. Now, an avera is the same way. If you quietly and accidentally train your children by your behavior, that a lot of the details of this whole Torah thing, it's about the intent that matters, or something nonsensical like that. So then they're going to grow up with this malach around them, with this influence that just got passed along by accident. So that was true about Shevet Yehuda, he says, because Yehuda was the one who went to Yaakov Avinu and said, he told him, is this your son's coat? I mean, he led him to believe that his son Yosef was dead. And that was a form of dishonest communication. He didn't really say that was a lie. Well, the Meraglim didn't either. And Kolev, therefore, was in grave danger of imitating that because he was from the tribe of Yehuda. And that's why Kolev is described as having a Ruach Acheres. So he's quoting this from the Alshich. The Ruach Acheres, the different perspective, the different attitude that Kolev brought was different than what was ingrained in Shevet Yehuda. So he made a big change. And that's Lo vayimale acharai, says the Alshich. He followed me. And not after hakoach misa'avo hadovuk bo me Yehuda. Not after the spiritual impurity that might have caused him to fall into that trap that came to him from Yehuda. And for that reason, he comes into the land of Israel. Okay, so Elazar, who we're talking about, right? The father of Pinchos. So he took a wife from the daughter of Putiel. This is Yisro, who spent a lifetime worshiping idols, fattening cows for idols. It doesn't go away. That doesn't go away so quickly. A lifetime. His daughter was educated in a home where they worshipped idolatry. Aaron HaKohen, he goes on, made the egel, made the golden calf. So there was idolatry in there. And those influences were there in Pinchas's, they were on his shoulder. Those are the negative influences, is what he says. Not only did he not go with the negative attitudes, he fought violently against them. Pinchas stood up. He killed Zimri. He stood up for the right thing. And what was the issue? That she was a Bas El Nechar. She was the daughter of a false god. In other words, this was attaching to idolatry in a meaningful way through marriage, through. He says that's what it means in the pasuk. Pinchas ben Elazar. So, who took children? Right? Who was from Yisro, from Putiel? Ben Aaron HaKohen, who made the golden calf. Heishiv es chamasi, bekano es kinasi. He settled my anger over so many things that happened generationally. Bekano es kinasi. What he did was not a quiet moment in his life. It was about what the kahuna stands for. It was about what Aaron was really supposed to be doing. He stood up in a moment when everybody was going to be against him and had no fear of the entire Jewish people settling him down, which Aaron did. And so in a certain way, he exemplified this. Now, I'll just tell you something really important that I see so often that I can't help but go on a tangent for a second. There's so many people who come from challenging childhoods, especially in post-Holocaust time. But it's been that way. I mean, it was always post-Holocaust for the Jews. Since the Churban, there hasn't been a time where there wasn't another October 7th in our little town again and again and again. And what happens is you have a boy who, as a little boy, was not hugged by his parents and was not given the love that he should have gotten. Now, you're going to blame the parents? They were heroes for having children at all. And then that keeps passing down. And the answer is, you have to be the one to stop this. It has to stop right now. No, I come from a long line of angry men. You know, I've heard this from people like, Rosenberg men are all, or whatever it is, right? And the answer is, yeah, that's very possible. And it's actually a good explanation for why you react and behave this way. I'll accept it on a physical level, on a spiritual level, right? I explained it on a more psychological way. I'm sure there's a whole spiritual level to it too that I don't understand. It doesn't matter. It has to stop now. You are responsible. If you are Pinchas, your heroism is going to be that this doesn't pass to the next generation. I don't know, the way I was raised, the people, it's true. And I'm sorry they were so mean in the cheder. But it has to stop now. It can't keep going on and on. And that is one of the big jobs that we have. We're supposed to have this attitude that Mashiach is going to come. And we believe in Mashiach coming. And the problem is that it really sounds like our behavior has some kind of an impact. At least if we want it sooner. Zachu be'ita. I mean, it sounds like we're supposed to be, I don't know, we hear these things. I mean, I don't do mitzvahs, do the right thing, bring Mashiach. Certainly, that was the attitude of Lubavitcher Rebbe, right? And many great people that we need to have that on our mind as a. Now, I understand Rashi was unsuccessful in bringing Mashiach. Rabbi Akiva did not get it done. So you think you're going to do it? Who do you think you are? How? And the answer really is that we're on the shoulders of giants. And sometimes, I pick up my child to touch the ceiling. It's not something I can do. And so in a certain way, they all built, and we're at the top of that. Which means that our whole job in life is not to reinvent the wheel, but there are things that are still not right. In our families, no matter how great our ancestors were, they weren't perfect. Now, we're standing on their shoulders, so they're giants. They're miles ahead of us. That's not the issue. And a lot of times, you can hear the following message. You know how in Europe it was. Every wagon driver knew Shas. And did you ever hear this kind of talk? Now, that's nonsense. I mean, if you look at it, it wasn't that way. Just historically, that wasn't true. But the greatness that did exist was a whole different level than anything any of us have seen. The greatness of the simple Jew and the Rosh Yeshiva and the depth of learning. And here we have, but you know what the answer is? Like, there's things that we can do, that you and I can do today that nobody can ever do. No one in history has been able to do. There is a Rabbi Yerucham Levavitz is the way that I know this source, and I traced it back. It's there from Reb Chaim Vital. Reb Chaim Vital was a student of the Arizal in the 1500s, the great student of the Arizal, and he says to him, I mean, we're nothing compared to the people who lived before us. So what chance do we have of really doing anything meaningful spiritually? And the Arizal said back to Reb Chaim Vital that nowadays the Yetzer Hara is so strong. nowadays it is so challenging to serve Hashem that if there's a person who's still trying and is committed and is observant and is doing their best, they certainly must have a neshama like one of the Amora, like one of the rabbis of the Gemara. This is there in the writings of the Arizal, and that was a long time ago. That was a long time ago. That was before the world deteriorated to what we sometimes can experience today, where people can't figure out what a gender is and can't figure out, where the world is just so confused. But it's very meaningful. Whatever we have to do, it may be small and it may pale in certain ways in comparison to what happened before. This is it. These are the finishing touches. We can pass along something to our children and grandchildren that takes all the good stuff, as Pinchos did. And I think that we have to realize it's a tremendous responsibility. Your children could grow up with the same stupid, cynical behavior that you have. Or the little improvements that we make can have endless impact on them. And Kalev is described as having done that for Aaron HaKohen. For Yehuda. And Pinchas for Aaron HaKohen. So let's not think that somebody is too great. No, this person was too great. They were too perfect. It's not the attitude. They were extremely great. That's everything we stand on. There's still something for you to do. There's still something for me to do. Okay, step 2. What are your motivations? This is my question. What are your motivations in what you're doing? I want to explain. The person who's sitting in shul and somebody starts talking in shul. Now, in the Shulchan Aruch, it says not to talk during shul. And there are even some terrifying things that it says, that in the 1600s, people spoke in shul too much and tragedies came. That's how the Jewish people. So I'm not into sharing terrifying things, and I suspect that it didn't just mean people spoke in shul. I suspect it was the root cause of a very serious problem that was just manifested. Sort of like when the Gemara says they didn't bless over the Torah before they studied Torah. It wasn't just that crime; it was a whole attitude towards Torah study, and there's hundreds of pages written, thousands, written to explain the nuance behind that. So I don't know how to explain that people died because they talked in shul, but it's definitely not the best idea. So you have somebody in shul who's just furious. I mean, they hear people talking in shul and they're furious, and it makes them so angry. So I want to tell you what's really going on. That's a grumpy person with bad midos, and they get grumpy about a lot of things. And it happens to be here, like even a broken clock is right twice a day. So it happens to be they're angry at something that is incorrect. That person is not exhibiting good midos. But when you try to explain it to them, it's very challenging because look at the Shulchan Aruch. So the Shvatim were claiming, do you know where Pinchas is really coming from? He's coming from alien values. He's coming from the bloodthirstiness of an idolater. He's coming because he's jealous. When they saw Pinchas walking into the room with Zimri and Cosby, they said to themselves, he's coming to join in the sexual immorality. In other words, they looked at him as somebody who was, maybe he did the right thing. Maybe. I don't know if I can argue with the halacha l'Moshe Missinai. But they said he's coming from the wrong place. And that's what Rashi says. Hashem says, no. He's coming from his Aaron HaKohen side. So first I want to explain that idea that we have to know where are we coming from. My wife showed me something from Yitzhak Berkowitz. Yitzhak Berkowitz, who I had the privilege to learn under in Yerushalayim a little bit. So he was talking about how in the times of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, there was sinas chinam. And the sinas chinam was a question between people as to whether or not Jews should maintain their independence from the Romans or not. I mean, if you look at what they were fighting about, it was as serious as can be. Should a Jew go to the army and defend the state of Israel or not? I mean, that's a pretty serious question. And the stakes are extremely high. Will we lose our country? Is it pikuach nefesh? Is it milchemes mitzvah? And you have people on this side sitting in Bnei Brak who say no, they shouldn't. And you have people, right, sitting in the holy city of Ephrat who say they should. And I mean, what is there worth fighting over if not this? And Rabbi Berkowitz says, you see that whatever we think chinam is, we don't understand what a good reason to hate someone is. That was how he put it. I just want to explain further. I think there's more nuance to it. He had a 3-minute slot to be able to say something quickly. The There's a Tosfos in Bav Metzia that we spoke about once this morning. Did we talk about it? Okay, Benny and I spoke. There's a Tosfos in Bav Metzia that says that a very interesting rule. If you have a neighbor who needs help loading their animal, so the halacha is it's a mitzvah in the Torah called te'ina, to help load the animal. And there's another mitzvah called prika, which is to help somebody whose animal is overburdened when it's time to unload the animal. Prika and te'ina. Yeah, it sounds like two pair of twins, right? Prika and te'ina, right? I've met prikas. Te'ina sounds like, right. Okay, so yeah, hopefully you will remember this. Prika and te'ina, which one should you do first? So the Gemara says the halacha is that you should do prika first. You should help unload an animal before loading an animal because an animal is suffering. So this animal is doing nothing for you by keeping its load on. So by unloading it, you relieve suffering to an animal, and you should do that first because Tsar Ba'alei Chaim is an important Torah value. And only afterwards should you load up the other one. But what if you hate the person whose animal needs to be loaded? Then the Gemara says, even though normally we would consider an animal's feelings and unload before loading, if you hate the person whose animal needs to be loaded, you should help them first, and only afterwards unload. Tosa says, so that's a halacha. Lakuf es yitzro. That's a very good point. That's a very compelling. So lakuf es yitzro. So in the answer, you'll see he already knows. He already knows. You'll see. But lakuf es yitzro means to overcome your yetzer hara. So you're hating the person, you need to stop hating him. Now, Tosas has a question. Tosas says it's evident, he proves, that this is talking about a person who it's a mitzvah to hate. There are some people that it's a mitzvah to hate. A person who is, the way Rav Hirsch says it, Rav Hirsch says, hate the sin, not the sinner, unless, this is in the Chorev, unless the person has so identified themselves with the sin and the evil that they're inextricable. There are such human beings. We don't say we love Hitler, we just hate that. We don't say that. Right? At a certain point, a person becomes that. But short of that, a person can have a chedek l'olam. They can continue to exist without their evil. Their evil was, and that's when sin is prohibited. Sometimes a mitzvah to hate them. So says Tosos, if it's a mitzvah to hate him, why do you have to overcome your yetzer hara? So says Tosos something that is staggering. He says because you hate the person because it's a Torah commandment. But you know what happens when you hate someone? Kemayim aponim leponim. Just as water, just as a mirror reflects one person to the next, so that's how human beings are. And if you hate someone for the right reasons, he hates you back. Unjustly, he has no right to hate you back, but he does. He can't help it. So you know what then happens? You start hating him for his hatred. And that's not kosher. You're only allowed to hate him for the mitzvah. Do you see how nuanced that is? You can hate somebody, and it's a mitzvah to hate the person, and what you're doing is a crime that requires fixing your yetzer hara by helping him with his animal. So that you only hate him for the religious requirements and not for any of the personal things that can get mixed into. Okay, so this demonstrates that if you're not, you can't say that Rabbi Yisrael Salanter invented the subconscious or something, right? The study of like Musar. You can't say that. It's a Tosos. I mean, this is why they didn't need to learn so much Musar, because they kept pulling it out of. This is an example. It's just so nuanced. And how many people in the world have ever thought about that? How they feel about a political candidate. Why do I feel that way? Is it because of his values, or is it because I'm just a jerk who sometimes doesn't like people because of the look on their face, and I'm applying that to this person? You understand? And I don't know. I mean, people will say you didn't like that one because you're a little bit racist. See, you're crazy. I disagree with every policy. Those aren't mutually exclusive. It may also be. It might really be that way. Okay, so. Why is Pinchos doing this is a really important question. What's he doing it for? Is he doing it? So you and I have to know this. Is it for the right reasons? Is that really it? Meaning, does the person who's a chassid, right, of a big tzaddik, and there was another big tzaddik who attacked that person? So I understand it's very difficult. I mean, a person's rebbe is like their father, right? Do I really hate them because... Right? Am I angry at them? Am I have a hard time with them because of my frumkeit? Or is this just, you know what I'm saying? Is this just the Dodgers and the Giants, the Yankees and the Mets? Is this just the same stupid rivalry that people have when they're tearing down a football stadium after the wrong team won, right? Or the right team won. Sometimes they do it anyway, right? But in other words, is that what's going on? Not so simple. And therefore, the Torah is telling you got to be clear about this. Pinchos ben Elazar ben Arna Cohen. What happened? So the truth is, there's something very beautiful here from the Divrei Shol, Rabbi Yosef Shol Nathanson. So what does he say? He says, Hashem says that if a person is cruel to a widow and an orphan, if they call out to me, there will be all kinds of devastation to pay. V'chara api, v'haragti eschem bechorev, v'hayu neshechem almanos, u'benechem yisomim. It's a disaster. If a person is cruel to widows and orphans, Hashem will make your family into one that has widows and orphans, and they'll call, right? And because the Torah goes on to talk about this and says, because when these people call out to me, when the poor people and the needy people, v'shamati, I listen, ki chanun ani, because I'm very gracious. In such situations, Hashem listens, because He's kind and generous and gentle. So what are you talking about? We're just describing a scene of devastation and death and the chara api. So says the Divrei Shol that the Sefer Akedas Yitzchak, Rabbi Yitzchak Arama, who was just before the expulsion from Spain in the mid 1400s. So he says that lefamim kol mi shehu rachum v'chanum yoser, the more merciful and gentle and sweet, compassionate a person is to others, tigdal nikmaso ba'osei avel. So then that person is enraged by things that happen that are wrong. So what is Pinchas doing? Pinchas is demonstrating a very violent reaction. He murders two people. So the Torah says, and I say murder advisedly because Kana and Pogim both, they were allowed to defend themselves. So in other words, he had to go outside. It's vigilante justice, and he's going to kill some people in a pretty gruesome way. You know why? Because he really had compassion. So where does that come from? So he quotes here that the Zohar says that Shchita in the Beis HaMikdash, slaughtering an animal, did not need to be done by a Kohen. It was done by a Zar, or it could be done by a Zar. So the Zohar learns it should be done by a regular Jew. A regular Jew can shecht an animal for a korban. It's not that kind of avoda that needs to be done by a Kohen. Because Kohanim kulo chesed. Kohanim come from Aaron, and Aaron is love. He's chesed. And therefore, even slaughtering an animal is out of character for a Kohen. So, fattening up animals to then kill them for avodah zarah, how do you do that? I mean, every day you go out and you fatten up this animal, you give them food, and normally a person nourishes another living being. I mean, that's a very gentle and generous thing to do, but this is the opposite every time. Instead, so he was fattening up animals for idolatry. I mean, it's not even as if his children were hungry. It was for some sort of ideological purpose. So, Pinchas is just cruel. That was what they said. And they says, no, that's not it at all. He's sweet and kind, and he cannot stand the injustice. He cannot stand what it means to the Jewish woman when the Jewish men go and intermarry. He cannot stand what it means to Hashem. But that's out of chesed. It's out of love. It's out of sweetness. There is a beautiful line in the Zmiros of Shabbos. Mishoch chastecha liyodecha, kel kano v'nokem. Listen to the words. Extend your chesed, your kindness, to those who know you, O Lord, who is kano v'nokim, who takes vengeance and is angry. I don't know how to say it well, but in other words, kano v'nokim is the sense of Hashem, is zealous and vengeful. Okay, none of these words are really the right word, but so wait a minute. I would think to say, Mishoch chastecha leyodecha, kel rachum v'chanun. Wouldn't that be better? God who's merciful, who's kind, send us some kindness. Send us kindness, God who is vengeful and takes things personally, and it's a very funny thing to say. So they say it's brought down from the students of the Baal Shem Tov, a magnificent perspective. The Baal Shem Tov said the following thing. He said there was once a king who had a rebellion, and they all turned on him, and including, they all, right? A significant number of important people turned on him, including one of his closest, dearest friends, got caught up in this and rebelled against him. When he quelled the rebellion, he pretended that he didn't know that this guy was in league with them. And though everyone else was killed, this one, he kept doing kind things for. He made sure to take care of him and his children and his family, and he was constantly generous and kind to him. And this person, being fundamentally a decent person who had made a horrible mistake, began to just be racked with guilt. The king is so good and so kind and loves me so much that this is the best vengeance in the world, says the Baal Shem Tov. In other words, he keeps him alive and tortures him by giving him health and have. So we're saying to Hashem, says the Baal Shem Tov, we have made some mistakes as a people, as individuals. We have not done it all right. And Hashem, I know that one of your midos is that you're kanov and okay. So I have a suggestion. Give us health. Give us nachas from our children. Right? We are honest enough, it's going to kill us. And that's the best way that you can get back at us is with every bracha and every. That's the Baal Shem. Is that beautiful? Okay. Yeah, beautiful Hasidic Shavart. If anything sums up the whole revolution and how the Hasidim would try to look at Klal Yisrael. I mean, that's a beautiful thing. So, in fact, I have a suggestion. It's a pasuk in Mishlei, which says, "Im ra'ev sonacha hachileu lechem." If your enemy is hungry, give him bread to eat. V'im tzameh, if he's thirsty, hashkeu mayim, give him water to drink. Why? Why should you do that? He's your enemy. Ki gechalim atachosa al rosho, because in doing so, you shovel hot coals onto his head. And Hashem yishalem lach, and Hashem will pay you back. So, in other words, if you want to take revenge, and you're driven to take revenge, so take revenge by doing a favor for somebody who did something horrible to you. That's the way to do it. Why is that so good? Well, it punishes him, and Hashem pays you back. So I just want to say, it could be, what is Hashem yishalem lach? We have a principle all throughout Torah, again and again, of what we'll call Hashem tzilcha, God is your shadow. As the Nefesh Chaim says, whatever you do, you behave with kindness to others, Hashem behaves with kindness to you. You behave in an exacting way, Hashem will do that for you, and so forth. So, if you will choose to pay back your enemies, right, with nikama, with revenge of the sort where you're doing them a favor, then ends the pasuk, v'Hashem yishalem lach, then Hashem will pay you back. It could be that that's a fair reading of the pasuk, that Hashem will give the same sort of nikama to you. So if that's how you have, now I want to tell you that there's a few tremendous advantages to paying back good. My wife is a great granddaughter of the Alter of Nevarduk, and the minhag in her family in Nevarduk, Rabbi Avram Yafin, her great grandfather, would always say in Nevarduk, when somebody does something negative to us, we pay back good. Mishalem tova tachas ra, right? Hatova tachas hakpada. If somebody does something negative to you, then you pay them back. There's a story in the family that there was a young man, a young rabbinical student who wanted Rabbi Avram and Rebbetzin Sarah. She was the daughter of Dalton Nevarduk. They were Rosh Yeshivas in America, early 1900s already, and they wanted him to please come to my wedding. And he said, we're older people, and it's really hard for us to travel. He said, Rosh Yeshiva, I will send a car for you. And he felt he couldn't say no. Chassan is asking so sincerely, you should come to the wedding. They go outside, there's no car. And it starts to rain, and there's still no car. And they take the subway. They didn't have the money to get their own car, and they took the bus to the subway. They show up to the wedding. It's a pretty exhausting trip for them. And he comes to the wedding, and the Chassan barely acknowledges him. I mean, he's one of the great Rosh Yeshivas in America. He doesn't get a bracha under the chuppah. He doesn't get anything. He doesn't especially dance with it. I mean, they're just sort of there at the wedding. And then when the wedding's over, there's no car to take them home. They have to take the bus to the train, to the next train, to the bus. A whole schlep. Okay, that's the end of that story, and that goes by. It's maybe 15 years later. There was a grandson's wedding, and every gadol b'Torah is there. The Yafins made a shidduch with Rav Moshe Feinstein because his granddaughter married Rav Moshe's grandson. And you come to this wedding, and every gadol in America is there. And it comes to bracha achrita at the wedding, the final bracha, and some young, modern, clean-shaven-ish rabbi is called up in front of everyone and gets this bracha, and no one knows why. And years later in the family, he let it slip that this was the young man who had called him to the wedding and didn't give him any honor. So he gave him the greatest honor he could. Because that's how we handle things in Nevarduk, is that if somebody does something negative to us, right, we do something good back to them. So it's a pasuk that's what you're supposed to do.
Does the young guy have any idea why we call it
I don't know. I have no idea. Nobody in the family really knew the story until later in life. For some reason, he let the story out. I'm glad he did, because like we said, hopefully that malach is sitting on our shoulder and pushing us to do the same thing. But I experienced this in my life. I had a story where I felt frustrated. I felt misunderstood. Things were published in the newspaper, right, about me and about things that I did, and it was just not an accurate description, and it was like a disaster a little bit. But Baruch Hashem, nothing is a disaster. Anyway, I was fine. I had other opportunities. I had a beautiful family, a beautiful shul, like nothing. My life was fine. But over the course of like the next almost year, I would say, every so often I would be sitting there, randomly it would hit me. I'm like, there were these people, and I was so good to them. And when their daughter needed help, they came and they cried to me. And I mean, they're sitting on, I don't know if they're on the board, they're influential people. So even if you say, listen, Achana, we have to fire you. We have to let you go. It's bad for the institution. I have to think about this. I can accept that. How did you not send flowers? How did you not call me? How did you not reach out to me when you needed kindness? Like, right, this would like hit me. And then I would get past it. Baruch Hashem, quickly, a good life, everything's fine. Like it didn't. Okay, I'm going to tell you when it completely went away. When I decided to do a favor for these people, to do something for them. It gave me back my whole, I was dependent upon them for my happiness. If only that person would like me, then my life would be okay. I mean, why are they, and the answer is, I don't know, they have bad midas, they don't know what to say, they're not, whatever. They're not bad people, they're wonderful people, but like, still, I've given them the whole key. The minute that I decide that I'm going to be a kind person, even if you were bad to me, I'm going to be a kind person. In fact, I'm going to be even nicer because you do not own me. So then it was magical. I didn't do it. I really did it like the pasuk says. Okay, it'll get them back. It's a mitzvah. It's something that we do in my right. I married into this family. This is what they do. But it was like a magical thing. Like the minute I stopped thinking about myself and how I could, and this is a klal always. If every time you call your mother, she drives you batty. This is a story. Guy says, my mother drives me crazy and she criticizes if I'm eating and this and that, and I just can't talk to her anymore. And I said to him after a while, I have a suggestion. You're going to call her up on your own schedule. Whenever you want, you can hang up the phone. You just hang up and text afterwards and say, you know what, the service is funny. I don't know what happened. Say don't tell her I'm hanging up on you because I don't like you. Find some other way. Mishan b'nei Shalom. Make up whatever you can that she'll believe. And I even told her my trick. This is what I do when I need to get off the phone sometimes. If I've ever done this to you, this is what's happening. If I make it clear once or twice, I really have to run, and the person's still going, I suddenly start with this. Oh, I've got a really important thing that I just want, and then I hang up. That's a good trick, right? Write this down. If you take nothing from this year, this is useful. Oh, that's good news. Okay, listen to this one. They can't even suspect because I had something I wanted to tell them. And I was in the middle of saying it, and the call got cut off. Okay, so I gave him different tricks. But I said, you're going to call your mother as often as you feel appropriate, once a week, twice, whatever it is, and you're going to have an intention of what you're doing to her. I'm calling to her to give her nachas, to calm her. The thing she says to me, I'm basically going to ignore because it's not about that. I'm the influencer here. I'm the one doing this. That's the teaching of Rabbi Yankel Galinsky, which is life-changing. He says, Oil Russia, the oil shchena. Woe to the wicked person, say our sages, and woe to his neighbor. I mean, a person has an influence on their neighbors. And then it says, Tov l'tzadik v'tov l'shchena. It's good for a tzaddik and his neighbor. So what happens if they move in next door? Does the tzidkus and the evil like meet in the middle and it starts to rain? Like what happens? Right? It's like a force field. So the answer is, it depends who's the balabas, he said, and who's the neighbor. Only one can be the neighbor. The other person's the main guy. Is he the main guy and you're his neighbor? Yeah, then it's tough for you. But if you can be the main one, you learn this from the Chabad shluchim. They don't go and hang out in the campus, frat house or something, go to those parties. They bring them over to their house for a Friday night meal. You understand? In other words, they're the balabas. It doesn't matter where they go in the world, they're the balabas. In their little, and they're there to influence, and they know who they are. Okay. Not always true about the child of the kiruv person, or that's not always as easy. Sometimes they do get hit by because they don't necessarily, but very often they're fine because if this is done well, who are you? Are you the one who spreads the good news? Okay. So perhaps that's also what's behind it. When you take that control and say, I'm the one who's going to be creating the relationship here, I'm going to be doing it that way. So that's In other words, even doing kindness can come from the midah of nikama. Just as something vicious can be an extremely kind action coming from the Aron HaKohen, so too can the negative feelings that a person has turn into kindness too. And that's a very valuable thing to know, because do you want to be kind? I mean, but so even if you have a negative midah like this, where you really feel like you want to take revenge, okay, that's manageable. There's a I'll show you one more thing here. Rav Yisrael Nathan, in a different year, a different time, he said something a little different relating to this. He said, when a person has feelings of anger and a desire for vengeance toward another person, sometimes doing even a small thing can be enough. So in other words, you're really angry at someone, so you bottle it up. That's terrible. You understand? You bottle it up, but you do one thing, so you just hit them. So you just punch them. That can be enough. Now, you're not allowed to do that. But he says, he brings this from a Rambam in the Sefer HaMitzvos. I want to show you what it says. In the Rambam, there's a mitzvah not to curse a deaf man. Lo sekal al cheresh mitzvahs lo saseh shin yud zayin 317. Don't curse the deaf. And he says, what is that about? Shehiz harnu. He's he reinu mila kalal eza ish shehumi Yisrael. You're not allowed to curse any Jewish person, man or woman. You're not allowed to curse them. But it says don't curse the deaf. So says the Rambam in Shin Yud Zayin. Shema mimeni inyan amaro cheresh. Please listen to me. Are we listening? He's talking to us. Yeah, he meant us. He meant us. Listen to me when I tell you what this means. Hanefesh kishehisno linkom mehamazik. A person's spirit, when they become inspired to take revenge against another person. Lefitzuras hezekachayemes bedimyon. So, according to some sort of fantasy and imagination of what they want to do, lo tasur mehayos misno aas at shetigma lamazik lefitzuras hezekarishuma bedimyon. A person who gets it in his head that I have to get back at this person in a specific way will never really feel settled until he actualizes that. When he kasher shlema lo gemul or shalma lo gemul tanuach oso hatnua v'ne'edara oso hatzura min adimin. At that point, he can stop obsessing over this. But until then, it just doesn't leave his mind. Sometimes he says, "Pamim tishamenu gemul beklala ubecheirufin." Sometimes you curse the person, you insult them, and that sort of feels good. The tanuach bedaito, and then the person feels fine. Because he thinks that, Bashir, when he considers, I cursed that guy out good, and it really insulted him, it embarrassed him. Sometimes a person does something worse to you. That spirit of wanting to get them back won't help until I financially ruin the person entirely. He says, and it could get worse. Sometimes, not only to financially ruin them, but you need to sometimes you need to attack the person and cause them to lose some of their limbs, or else you can't. It's not justice until that. He says, and sometimes sometimes the way they translate the Rambam here is that sometimes you need to get him out of existence entirely, not just kill him. He needs to cease to exist, right? It's magnificent translation. This is the purpose. That's the ultimate. Sorry. In other words, that's the ultimate. Sometimes it's very small. Sometimes you just want to punish him in a small way. And sometimes you just want to curse at him in private. Even though he'll never hear you cursing him. So it really has no impact on him. Sometimes angry people, the way they behave, they settle themselves down by cursing somebody who's not even there, by yelling at someone who's not in the room. Now, a person could have considered that when the Torah teaches you not to curse other people, the reason that that's wrong, says the Rambam, is When this person hears you speaking this way, he'll experience great pain. But cursing a deaf man, in other words, somebody who can't hear it, you might think that that's really not a sin. So the Rambam does not go on to say, you know why it's bad? Because curses float through the air. He didn't really express that attitude. He said something else. That might be true. I don't know how it works. But he says, Hodianu. No, listen, I'm not. Shehu Osir. The Torah is not only thinking about the person who gets cursed. It wants you not to be the sort of person who talks that way about other people. You shouldn't move yourself towards any sort of revenge. Don't train it in anger. So it's not nothing. It's a good idea. If you have to scream at one of your children, if you have to scream at your spouse, and instead of doing that, you go to the car, right? And you get in there. So that's definitely better than screaming at them. But you have not solved your problem. You have not really gotten what the Torah wants you to get. The problem with a man who screams at his wife, right? The problem with a parent who right, is not just a problem that it's bad for the child. I mean, it is, but it's poison for the person. Okay. Therefore, even doing something, says the Rambam, what he took from this, first of all, there's a lot, and it relates so much to the psukim we were talking about and how you need to react when somebody does something to you, because that becomes the measure of the whole person. Is, who am I now? Am I any less of a kind person? Am I any less of a refined person? Okay, so now, because of this, however, he says that you'll notice in the Purim story, he quotes a medrash, he uses this to explain a medrash, how angry, v'chamaso ba'arabo, the anger of Achashverosh burned in him. So the Medrash says, ad hechan ad v'chamaso shachacha. How long did it last? Until he hung Haman on the tree, and then the anger of the king was forgotten. So he says, in other words, he just couldn't get it out of his system. I mean, until he physically did something. And he says, that's like that Rambam. Okay. And then he says, Hashem was upset at the Jewish people. Pinchos ben Elazar ben Arnakoy, Heishiv es chamasi. He got rid of my anger. How? Because he stepped in and he killed two people. And I didn't have to wipe out the entire Jewish people. I mean, my anger was severe enough that it could have influenced the entire nation. And it said Pinchas stepped in and made sure that only the two people responsible, or most responsible, would get the punishment. And because he did something, that was enough. So you have to do something. You have to do something. If you really are driven to take revenge, you have to do something. But you know what you have to do? You have to do kindness to the person. If you can let it go, let it go. You don't have to be angry at everything. But once you get a little bit angry, I mean, you've got to do something to get it out of your mind. You've got to do something, he says. And Pinchas, Hashem has to have something done on his behalf. So whatever that means about the infinite creator of the universe, I can't begin to opine. But I tell you that it's very meaningful for you and me. You have to do something. If you really are holding that against your cousin, against your uncle, against your spouse, against your friend, whatever it is, it really bothers you. You have to do something. You're never going to get rid of it otherwise. But the best solution is hachilei olechem. Find out what they're hungry for and find out what they're thirsty for and try to give that to them. Try to do something good and kind for them, and Hashem will pay you back for it. And you will feel better than any other form. Nekama, taking revenge, it's a language from the Rishonim, is mesuka midvash. It is sweeter than honey. It's sweeter than honey. But I want to tell you two things. We said last week, I think it was last week, we said that people call their wives honey because we talked about being too invested in those sort of things, too much around the house, too much, right? So, okay, so that's what we know about honey. One bite is delicious, two bites is delicious. Revenge is sweeter than honey, but I want to tell you that too much of it, right, is not, it destroys the person. But not only that, it's mesuka midvash, and you have to do it. And the Torah prohibits it. Or prohibits it in most situations. Anyway, the one way that's guaranteed to give you that sweetness, and it's totally counterintuitive, is do something nice, do something good, do something kind. And fascinatingly, that's what Pinchas was doing. Isn't that something? I mean, that's what he was doing. He was doing something extremely kind, which
Skewered them.
skewered them. And he saved the lives of an entire people. Look, at least he has been Yisrael b'kinasi. He saved the lives of an entire nation. On Magefa Ne'etzar, 24,000 had already died. And magnificent. I mean, okay. What are we going to finish with? Okay, we'll just say like this. We'll just say, going back to what we started with, Pinchas is walking in. He's walking in to kill Zimri and Cosby. Remember, I told you the people said Afhu Lasos Chachav Nichnas, that he's also coming in to join in this behavior. So the first way we explained that one of the nuances you see is how much they thought of Pinchas. I mean, is that what you see when the great Rosh Hashiva is walking? The first thing you would think is he's coming to participate. So clearly they didn't think much of him. They said, he's a Ben Puti. But the truth is, Pinchas was not a man with hatred and anger. And I can prove it. Because had he been angry and fired up, then he wouldn't have walked in calmly, smiling. He would have walked in with a spear, yelling, like I was always pictured it as a child, yelling, I don't know, Geronimo, right? Ah! Right? And in a war cry, coming in. That's what Pinchas was, right? And that's just, you know who he was? He was congenial, he was friendly, he was smiling at everyone, and then he killed 2 people. So it wasn't coming out of his bad midos. This guy's always looking for a fight. It wasn't at all. He says, there's a Drushas Haran, which he brings, the way he says it in another piece from Yosef Shal. I just found so many interesting things. Here, he says, there's a famous piece from the Drushas Haran, and this is like, the Ran says that midos are generally inherited and hashkafos are not. In other words, the way he calls it here, midos means a person who's kind, a person who's gentle, a person who's violent. So these are things that it's almost like you're born with. And they often come from the family. Like the Gemara says, a person born under Mars really can't change the fact that he's going to be bloodthirsty. He can choose how to use that effectively, to be a shochet, to be a moel, but, right, Hanoch L'Api Darko, educate a child according to his derech, right, because Gam Ki Yaskin, even when he gets old, Lo Yasser Mimenu says, he'll never leave behind his derech. Never leave behind. So you can try to bend him this way and that way. You need to train him how to use his derech. Okay, that's probably the most important thing in all of education, is realizing that he'll never leave behind his derech. You cannot crush anyone into being a clone or being the same as anyone else forever. It won't work. So, however, midos are somewhat inherited, and it's very difficult for anyone to ever change it, and possibly impossible. But deos, which may be midos according to the Rambam, we'll say it this way, right? Hashkafic attitudes. One of my Rebbeim used to tell us, he would say, it makes almost no difference what the religious philosophy of the girl that you're dating's parents have. But it makes all the difference in the world what their midos were. Because if she came from a family that was more Hasidish, but now she's more where you are, so then she changed her mind. And she came from a family that was far less observant. Okay, but now that's where she is. But midos and attitude, the things that you learned that pass along, they're very difficult to change. And that's sort of the derech eretz called Torah. Being a healthy person, being a kind person, being a good, adjusted person is something that's very difficult to change. You say, no, but he's the best boy in yeshiva. Yeah, but did he come from a stable environment? That's what I see in my time, is that the people that come from, you could know this, is if you raise your children in a stable, healthy, adjusted home where the parents love each other and Judaism is expressed positively in the home and they don't have any extremely bad experiences, those kids stay committed to observance. And you understand now, sometimes if you raise them in a society where everything is against that, if a person who's modern Orthodox is going to move into New Square, they're going to have trouble. So you have to find a place that you can fit. But this is almost 100% of the time. When people find a place where their family fits nicely and the Judaism in the home is positive and healthy, because the good midos, the good healthy. Okay. So he says that the way he says it, Mashakasav Haran in the Drush Chamishi, that Avram told Eliezer famously, I want you to go to my family. There were tons of people who had converted to Avram's way of thinking in his area. And he says, I only want you to take a wife or get something from my family, because my family has better midos. These people have better theos. They have better, opinions about things. So that's the Ran. So he says, the way he says it is that Avram said, person who worships idols That's a kochos hanefesh. That's a mental thing. And that doesn't pass down to children. But mashu mekochos haguf, things that are in the physical body, that passes down to children. In other words, it doesn't just mean physical, but similarly, I mean, hair color, right, is part of it, and people look like their parents, and midos are also part of it. They're also part of it. But he says they thought that what Pinchas had done was out of cruelty, and that sort of thing. He was motivated by his ingrained midos that came from his ancestors, from Israel. And what they didn't understand, he says, is that he was motivated by his ideals and attitudes, and that everybody can create their own. As much as we are tremendously influenced, and it is part of it, in terms of our demons, our insecurities, and so many things, has an enormous influence. Who came before us and how they passed that along to us. I always like to say over the study from Emory University with the mice. What did they do? They took cherry blossom scent, and they gave these mice an aversion to the cherry blossom scent. So they give them a little, shock or something every time they smelled it. The grandchildren mice of those mice had the same aversion. They'd never smelled cherry blossom before. As soon as they smelled it, they panicked, and the other ones did. So we talk about Sos Avos and the impact of Avram Avinu and the behaviors of people that came before us. And for many spiritual things, it's enormously been beneficial to us. And for other things, it could be that, the Ashkenazi Jews have propensity to gain weight, right? And so, I eat barely, a little cool mountain water, right? And some cabbage. That's basically all I eat. And it's just bad, they were always surviving on potatoes. And right, that's my only possible explanation. It's a metabolism. But this is important. In other words, we have certain diseases, we have certain things that come along. We also have great spiritual benefit that comes from our ancestors. You understand? In other words, it gets into our very bones, our very DNA. And as science is learning to track it, they're learning to already see. They can see where does the sperm of this mouse, adjust so that it continues to pass us along. It's like the most fascinating stuff. So we conclude with this. We come with a lot of magnificent, amazing things from the Aaron HaKohens and even from the Yisros, but we also come with some baggage. Even the Aaron HaKohen can come with some baggage. Even the greatest of people were not completely perfect. They were just the holiest and greatest and as close to perfect as we can imagine. And we got all that. We have all this treasures inside of us. We also have something left to do. There's something left for each person to do. And that's very important. And Pinchas demonstrates that. We also have to know that the way we do it and why we do it is extremely important. We have to know that we are passing things along to future generations. So it's very significant. It should stop here, right? It should come out that in our family, we love Judaism. In our family, we are kind. In our family, we are forgiving. That should be something that's passed along, even if you don't say it like a slogan, which there's no good reason not to. It works. They put slogans on billboards for $50,000, and it influences people. So it might work to say it, but to do it, that's very important. And ultimately, to understand that the greatest possible way to take control over our life, to be that person who's taking control in the way that Pinchas is demonstrating, is perhaps to not allow anybody else to trigger us, not allow anybody else to anger us or to make us, now I have to take her. And when we have those feelings, we have to turn them around in a productive way. So that, yes, if you really feel you have to take revenge, if you just can't get over it, be extra kind. And you'll find that it's incredibly enriching. I found in my life that it saved me. It helped me so much. And for that reason, I'm willing to share it with you, even though it, perhaps it makes me look a little bit petty or something when I start telling you about all the, all the insecurities that led to that epiphany. But halavai, that we should be able to really soak up these beautiful, magnificent, and timeless messages and implement them. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Advice your brother-in-law. Did they say that about Gershon or not? Like, were the Yidden saying Ben Putin to that?